What I'm shocked by are the levels of unemployment and poverty that are in South Africa. South Africa freed itself from apartheid and has now got the courage to take on Israel and the rest of the world because very few others were supporting this. Well done, South Africa. Governments that supply arms to Israel, which are being used to bomb Gaza, and Britain is one of them, are clearly complicit. The Israeli government and its forces are killing civilians in huge numbers. So it is beyond illegal and disgraceful what is going on. There is a need for an alternative, which is why we announced we wanted to set up a new party, YourParty.uk.
Today on SMWX, I'm joined by Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the UK Labour Party and a veteran member of Parliament. He's one of the most recognisable left voices in global politics. We'll talk to him about why he's helping to build a new political movement in Britain, his outspoken stance on Gaza, and why he's come to South Africa. Jeremy Corbyn, thank you for joining us. It's really wonderful to have you here.
Great to be here.
There's a famous photo of you being arrested in 1984 at an anti-apartheid protest. I've always wondered what the context around that moment was.
It's funny you should say that. I've just come from a big trade union discussion. That was exactly the same question I got. There was a move to have demonstrations outside the South Africa House, South African High Commission in London. And the idea was to have a non-stop picket, so it would go on 24/7. This was announced, and a number of us were invited to go to the first day of it and inaugurate it, so to speak. So I went along with two other MPs, the late Tony Banks and Stuart Holland. And the police said you can't demonstrate on the pavement in front of the embassy. And so basically they were trying to keep the front of the embassy clear of any protesters so that the pictures on South African television would always look like the embassy is operating in the normal way. And so they threatened and said, look, if you go there, you'll be liable to arrest for obstruction. And so one by one we went up with the placard and got arrested. I was arrested and with the placard, and there's a picture that's done the rounds on it. And then we put in police vans and kept for quite a long time, and then taken to a police station, and then taken into the charge room to be charged. And so I sit down there, and the police officer said, I'm going to charge you. I said, okay. With what? And I was assuming it would be obstruction, breach of the peace, that sort of thing. So the police officer then said, I'm charging you under the Diplomatic Immunities Act. So I said, what? He said, yes, sir, the Diplomatic Immunities Act. Okay. So what's that then? He said, you're behaving in a manner that is offensive to a foreign mission who have their offices in London. What do you have to say about that? So I said, well, this is a very interesting question, because I've come here to be as offensive as possible to the apartheid regime and the apartheid system. But I'm not going to make life easy for you. So I'll plead not guilty. So the case has to go to court. He said, okay. So I pleaded not guilty. And then we, a whole lot of us then put up a collective defence about the moral outrage of apartheid and our right to demonstrate on the streets of London our views on this moral outrage. And the court found in our favour, all of us. And so we then all applied for compensation for wrongful arrest, and we were all given compensation, all of which we gave to the ANC. So it was... we then had the non-stop picket outside the embassy for a long time, and that became one of many focal points in London of opposition to apartheid. But the anti-apartheid movement was very big towards the end, towards going up towards 1990. But in the early days, 60s, 70s, even early 80s, it wasn't that big. It grew massively when the ANC concentrated on Mandela and the release of Mandela. And the arguments with the British government about boycott of South African goods and sanctions against South Africa. And then, of course, there was the US sanctions as well, the congressional moves there. The international movement was important, particularly the sporting boycott. But economically, did it make much difference to the regime? I'm not sure. What really brought about the end of apartheid was the bravery of people in Soweto.
And what are your impressions of South Africa visiting today?
Well, I've only been here a few days, and so it's... we should have to be careful on judging the impressions.
Sure.
I've had a wonderful time and met some wonderful people, and we've done a lot of events on Palestine. I've just been at a long discussion with trade unions. What I'm shocked by are the levels of unemployment and poverty that are in South Africa. What I'm impressed by is South Africa's determination on the world stage to speak up against the genocide against the Palestinian people, and for that, absolute full marks, 100% congratulations.
I believe you were actually at our ICJ hearing.
Yes, I was. I was invited to go to the ICJ hearing, which was held in The Hague, of course, at the Palace of Peace. And it was a bitterly cold day, and we had to be there at 5 in the morning in order to get in, or to get registered to go in. It was some bureaucracy or other, and we did that. I was there with Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and we went there together, and then came back a couple of hours later for the start of the hearing. And it was amazing sitting in this beautiful building, listening to the most wonderful, erudite legal arguments being put on behalf of South Africa as to why they considered Israel had committed acts of genocide. Then looking at this ornate building and then thinking, South Africa freed itself from apartheid and has now got the courage to take on Israel and the rest of the world, because very few others were supporting this. Well done, South Africa.
I mean, as you mentioned, the Gaza crisis, the genocide that is unfolding, I mean, things just deteriorate to a more catastrophic and terrifying level each day. We've now got this global Sumud Flotilla of people from all around the world, including South Africa and Britain. What are your thoughts on that, as it appears they'll be heading towards Israel in the coming days?
I've got friends on the flotilla, and I'm in touch with them almost every day. I either phone them or message them to find out what's going on. And the message today was that they're back sailing. There've been some delays, that the Italian and Spanish naval vessels are there, 2 Italian vessels, and I think 1 Spanish, and now there are some Turkish naval vessels joined in as well, apparently today. And so we're into a very interesting scenario where a huge flotilla of small boats, which, with the best one in the world, can only be a limited help to a small number of people in Palestine, but the symbolism of it is absolutely enormous, are sailing towards Gaza. And they, I suspect, will either be intercepted, arrested, driven away, or something worse. Obviously, the world viewing this is very, very important. And some of the vessels are British registered, and we've asked the British government to treat them properly. And the British government is not a supporter of the flotilla any more than most of the other governments are. Some are a bit more supportive than others. But I think as a global symbol, it is huge. And I congratulate all those people that are on it.
In terms of Britain's involvement with the horrendous situation in Israel, on your trip here, you've been spotlighting the way that your government can be held to account. In what ways do you think that the British government is complicit in what is happening in Gaza at the moment?
Well, governments that supply arms to Israel, which are being used to bomb Gaza, and Britain is one of them, are clearly complicit. Governments that allow the use of military bases to access Israel are clearly complicit. Britain again. Governments that supply either arms or parts for weapons, such as the F-35 jet, are also complicit. Britain is, in that sense. So Britain is complicit. There are other issues about trade and trade sanctions and boycott, divestment and sanctions. And in that case, what came up this afternoon was a very interesting discussion with a group of trade unionists about the coal that's exported from South Africa to Israel. And the demand that South Africa ceases that export of coal, which seems to me exactly the same kind of arguments were used to campaign to isolate the apartheid regime in South Africa in the past. The similarities of the campaigns are huge. The violence, the catastrophic violence against the Palestinian people, I wouldn't say it's unique in world history, because there are many awful events in world history.
Sure.
But it's now gone on for 2 years, and the death rate is enormous. We know of 60,000 named individuals that have died. There are many more who have disappeared.
Absolutely.
Presumably their bodies are deteriorating under the rubble of Gaza.
And your government's recognition of a Palestinian state along with other Western nations, do you think that's a case of too little, too late?
Well, I've always called for recognition of Palestine. Indeed, I included it in the 2 Labour manifestos that I was involved in writing, and I voted for it on a non-binding motion in Parliament some years ago. So, yes, in that sense, I do welcome it. The problem is there are so many caveats around that recognition. It doesn't really give the authority for a Palestinian state to operate as it should, and it has to now be accompanied by an absolute demand for the withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza and the West Bank. But also it has to be an end to all arms supplies and arms sales and military information sharing with Israel.
What do you make of the Trump administration's role in all of this? The Biden administration was criticized heavily for its own complicity, but it seems as if we've gone from the complicit to the absurd with the Trump administration.
Well, the Israeli government and its forces are killing civilians in huge numbers. They are illegally occupying the West Bank, and the Israeli government is facilitating the annexation of the West Bank through the settlement policy. So it is beyond illegal and disgraceful what is going on. The problem is that international law essentially relies on countries accepting what their role is and their responsibilities are in international law. Israel has never done that. Israel is in breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention as an occupying power, in breach of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child imprisonment, in breach of the Genocide Convention for what's happened over a genocide, and in breach of all of the human rights conventions over treatment of prisoners, murdering of civilians, and of war crimes. And so the question then is, what does the rest of the world do about it? If they carry on treating Israel in the same way as Israel's always been treated by the West, then Israel's going to say, well, so what? What's it matter? There have to be consequences. Those consequences ought to be very tough sanctions on Israel and an end not just to investment in Israel, but an end to Israeli investment in other countries.
And yet in Washington, more and more politicians are beginning to speak out against Israel in a way that we haven't seen before. Senator Bernie Sanders recently calling what's happening in Gaza genocide, and we've got Zoran Mamdani running for New York mayor in a very critical role of in a very critical stance on Israel. What do you make of even mainstream US politicians now being quite vocal in their rhetoric?
mainstream politicians and centre politicians have now come very much on side on Palestine and Gaza. It hasn't always been the case. I've been involved in Palestinian issues for many decades, and there were times when it was a very, very small minority of us that would say anything in Parliament. And even at the time of the original demand for the ceasefire, there were many who did not want to call for a ceasefire. Indeed, there was manipulation of the process in Parliament to prevent an embarrassing vote taking place on that. Embarrassing, that is, for Keir Starmer. So it has changed, and it's changed because of popular opinion. I've never known such understanding and consciousness of an international issue as we're now getting on Palestine.
Absolutely. Well, let's come on to some of the UK politics, because a recent poll suggested that...
Can I say one other thing
by all
on
means.
Palestine?
Sure.
We've organised demonstrations all the time on this. And on October the 11th, we're doing a really big one.
Right.
And so if anyone's watching this, October the 11th, and you can get to London, please be there and join in. We need you.
Absolutely. Well, Jeremy Corbyn calls you to a protest. You have to go.
Thank you.
In terms of the UK, there was a recent poll which showed that something like 20% of the electorate is at least amenable to a new left alternative to Labour. And if you add the Greens to that, it could be even more. Are we witnessing a potentially historic moment in UK politics where the duopoly of Labour and the Conservatives may be broken?
Yes, there is it's a triopoly really, because the Liberal Democrats are not fundamentally different on economic, social or foreign policy.
Sure.
And so we are. The Starmer government that came into office last July has brought in austerity 2.0. It has continued privatisation of public services, and it has continued what's called the two-child benefit cap, which means that larger families get no benefit for the second, third, fourth, or whatever number of children they've got, which is very cruel and leads to a great deal of poverty. And so that is an example of what this government is about. There has been a sort of whole breakdown of trust in the Labour Party and the Labour government. It didn't start with the general election. It started before that with the ditching of all of the policies that we had bit by bit. And so I think that there is a need for an alternative, which is why we announced we wanted to set up a new party, YourParty.uk, and that has gone quite well. We're holding deliberative meetings all over the country in the next month to discuss the structure, the organisation, and the more detailed policies it will develop. But for the moment, the fundamental policies are redistribution of wealth and power and elimination of poverty. 2, an understanding of the need for public ownership of health and water and other crucial public services. Thirdly, recognise the environmental crisis that we're in and be prepared to sign up for net zero by 2030. And then the foreign policy questions, which are about peace, not war. Therefore, a ceasefire in both Ukraine and in Palestine. And that is what we're arguing for. We're not Reform UK. We are strongly opposed to them, where they simply blame refugees for every problem there is.
Ready to take your podcast to the next level? At IAEA Studios, you can film, edit, and release your podcast all in one place. From crisp visuals to clean sound, we've got you covered, and we can even distribute your podcast on YouTube and other platforms. The best part? It's brought to you by the same team that brings you SMWX quality. Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Welcome to IAEA Studios. Talk to us about the rise of the right as well, Nigel Farage and his new reform movement, because looking from South Africa, it's really quite terrifying to see some of the rhetoric that's coming out of the right in Britain right now.
Farage is an interesting phenomenon. He's been around for a long time. He's been in his Reform Party. He's been in a lot of other parties over the time. UKIP. He has always been UKIP, etc. And I once said to him, I've looked at the membership of your party, and the lowest membership in the whole country is in Islington North. And he said, Do you know why that is? I said, well, I've got a pretty good idea, but you tell me why it is. He said, they're too well educated and too intelligent to join our party. Which I wasn't sure whether that was patronising abuse or reality. I'm not really sure. But what he does is puts a sort of English bonhomie veneer on the most disgusting racist attributes and activities. And so you could ask Nigel Farage, if he was sitting here now, you could say, Mr. Farage, are you concerned about the problems of the delays on the trains that are going from London to Birmingham? He would say, probably, yes, I am, but within 30 seconds, he'd be blaming it on boat people from Calais. They're obsessed with blaming migrants who themselves are usually victims of war and human rights abuse. They've created the most vile, violent, disgusting attitudes in our society, and they've then mobilized people like Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson. That's the dangers that we're in at the moment. And so I do think what we need is a much stronger anti-racist voice, which is growing. The numbers of people now taking solidarity action in support of the refugees is very important. But above all, it has to be a left voice that challenges the way in which Farage ploughs this furrow of poverty, of underfunded public services, of disenchantment, of anger, of lack of ability to achieve in society because of the levels of poverty and high rents. He blames all that on refugees and migrants. What we need is a voice that's prepared to blame it instead on economic inequality and injustice. The Labour Party under Starmer has moved so far to the right that it is now a mirror image of the Tories on economic and social and foreign policy thinking. That's why we formed YourParty.uk.
And you say that your party's going well. As I mentioned, there's appetite. On the other hand, there have been some notable public spats with Zara Sultana, which Owen Jones described as something that could potentially be criminally self-indulgent. Do you believe we're past that now? It seems that things have now been patched up.
We're going to get there. We're going to get the party established, and I'm determined to make sure it works.
Absolutely. And plans for the future with your party and your hopes for where that could go?
Doing deliberative meetings now, which will take place over the next 6 weeks or so, and they are meetings of people that have signed up for the party to discuss what their vision for it is within the broad parameters of the founding statement. It's important that we hold that as the basic principles around the party. But my view is that it's got to be community-based, it's got to be grassroots-based, it's got to be accountable, it's got to be open to a whole range of people from different communities to come together. So we create a community culture rather than just a political party culture. And that to me is crucial. I've spent my life in the Labour Party, and the one thing I really wanted to achieve for the Labour Party was the principle of community organising and community activities of the party. I set up a community organising unit, and I appointed quite a lot of community organisers. And the opposition I received within the Labour Party hierarchy was absolutely massive. They were more opposed to that than anything else, because they saw that as a change in the culture of the way a political party operates. So I could see the value of it.
And in terms of that conference that will really usher this new party into being fully, when do you see that happening?
We're looking at it in late November.
Right.
Late November to set the party up and set it on its way. We've registered the party with the Electoral Commission. The final bits and pieces of the official registration are coming through. So it will be by then, within a few days, it will be a registered political party.
Be very interesting to watch. Do you care to venture on internal Labour politics? Is Andy Burnham going to...
Well, I follow internal Labour Party politics. It's impossible not to. And I have some friends who are still in the Labour Party. I've got a very large number of friends who are not in the Labour Party anymore. And Labour Party membership has gone down a great deal. Will Burnham challenge? He could, but I'm struggling to see how, because the structure of the Labour Party relies on being a member of Parliament in order to be an office holder in the party. That means he's got to become a member of Parliament again. So that means there has to be a by-election. He has to win that by-election, and then he has to mount a challenge. So if he is or does, we'll see what happens. But I'm interested to see what happens at the conference. But the support for Labour has fallen to roughly the same level of reform. The Conservatives are even lower. Greens have come up a bit, and us, without even being registered, are already doing extremely well in the polls.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn, it's been a joy to speak to you. Thank you for joining us on SMWX.
And I'm now going to deal with my dehydration problem and drink some more water. What I just realised is I've been running around all day and become completely dehydrated.
No problem, no problem. South Africa can do that to you, so make sure you
South African water.
Like, share, subscribe. Help us reach our next milestone of 400,000 subscribers, and keep it locked on SMWX. Aye.